Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So in the last analysis video, we took a look at Kim Carnes and I had quite a lot of people ask me the same question. And it related to why some singers have a rasp to their voice and why other singers have a clean sound to their voice. And they referenced the way that Kim seemed to jump between those two or cycle between having a cleaner sound and then get into something that sounded really raspy. So rather than answer all of the messages independently, I thought I'd make a video just to explain about RASP and how it comes about and the way that some people just have it naturally and others have to work at it in order to implement it as part of their vocal technique. So I'm going to start off with referring to singers that have a natural rasp to their voice. And when I say rasp, other people call it vocal distortion. It's not a clean vocal sound, it's something that almost sounds like it does have an effect of distortion like you'd use on your guitar, but on the vocal cords. So, getting into this happening naturally, you've got singers like Rod Stewart, great example, Bryan Adams as well. Guys that when they sing, they pretty much have it not only throughout their whole voice, but even when they talk, you can hear that there's a natural rasp to their sound. And when I talk, I've got quite a clean tone to my sound. But if I wanted to talk more like this, it starts to get a bit of a raspy sound. And it doesn't sound like my vocal cords are connecting in the same way as they do when I talk naturally. Now, when I put on a voice like that, it doesn't feel right because I'm doing it in my throat and my voice wasn't designed like that and it doesn't naturally talk like that. So I have to try and manipulate a different sound, and because I'm doing that talking, it just doesn't feel very good. And you can tell straight away that whatever you're forcing your voice to do is not something that's happening naturally. So you've got that first example, people that have it in their talking voice, it's just part of their voice. So when they start singing, it's naturally in there. And they can't sing a very clean note because their voice just doesn't work that way. And that's the thing that you've got to appreciate and understand, is that everybody's voices are different, and you can work at techniques, you can work at trying to get rasp or trying to clean up your vocal sound, but the best way to use your voice is just how it is without trying to do too much with it or forcing it too far away from the way that it wants to work. The second type of rasp or sound that I'm going to be referring to is that of singers who have been singing for a very long time, and just year on year their vocal seems to take on almost a smoky quality to it. And you wouldn't describe it as rasp per se, like heavy metal or something that's definitely on there. It's just got a kind of warmer sound to it that is almost like, you know, a valve amp when it's been warmed up. You just get a different quality to the guitar tone, but in this case, just the vocal cords and the overall sound. When talking about that kind of sound, it's not something that is limiting the vocalist and not affecting their range. It's just something that you might notice from when they first started singing or when you first heard them to then a little bit later on in their career, even 5 years, getting this ever so slightly more distinct sound that, you know, has a different edge to it, or just a different colour to when they first started singing. And again, it's not vocal damage, it's just something that happens naturally. The third example is somebody who might have a cleaner tone and singing voice in their lower range, but then when they start to push into their chest voice and really start to get up towards the top end, range-wise, of their chest voice, a rasp can start to materialize as they go up higher. And it's something that you hear with all of the classic Motown hits. They were always pretty much forced to push their voices to the top end of their chest register because that's where that emotion is, where you start to get a bit of rasp because of the amount of energy in the sound, the amount they're now really leaning on their diaphragms. And you'll find that, yeah, when you're singing lower down, you don't have to do as much work, but then the higher you go, the more work you have to put in. And generally, that starts to affect the tone, but it affects it in a good way, that you start to get this raspy sound, which is obviously going to give you so much more of a dynamic journey, not only volume-wise, when you're talking about going from, you know, a low note to then a higher note, top end belting in your chest register, but it'll give you dynamic range across the sound of your voice from clean to then raspy. You get a different emotion from something that sounds more like a shout as to something that sounds more like it's spoken. So just giving a quick example of that, you'll have notes that are lower down, for example, going, yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's quite clean. If I went, yeah, yeah, and go, yeah, yeah, you can hear how, as I'm starting to push chest voice higher up, yeah, yeah, you're now not getting, yeah, yeah, you're not getting a clean sound because I'm leaning into it. And some people would see that as having a hint of rasp on the sound, but all I'm doing is leaning into my chest voice, and the rasp is coming along with just that vocal technique of kind of pushing into it more, reaching for a higher note. And you don't want to kind of be reaching and kind of going, yeah, yeah, and doing that. You still want to have control of your note, but you're just leaning on your diaphragm in order to get that note and still have a lot of body in there, in that sound that you're going for. You don't want it to kind of be unsupported and kind of flip and, you know, make a bit of a mess of your high notes. And when it comes along like that, naturally, that's not going to do your voice any damage, or at least it's going to do your voice minimal damage when you compare it with trying to manipulate the sound yourself, rather than it being a byproduct of your vocal technique and just leaning into your sound a bit more. When I say that it's not going to damage your voice, it won't, unless you just keep on doing it over and over and over and over and over again. Because when you're belting, especially if you're actually doing it in your chest voice and taking those notes really high up there, and you're not using a mixed voice where you're borrowing from head voice and having a bit of chest voice, but then manipulating the tone that you're producing to sound like it's chest voice, that's a different thing. If you're belting at the top end of chest voice all the time and you're not resting your voice, then you will start to damage your vocal cords because it is a heavy sound. As you could probably hear when I compared that lower note to the higher note, you are going all out. And if you're deciding your schedule and you might be touring, you can put in dates that are rest dates for your voice. And you know, it is something that commonly on tour great vocalists will say. For every live performance, give it a good 70 to 75%. Meaning there's 25% of the voice that you're not just going all out for every show. You want to be at about 75% so that you can do all of the shows. If you're going 100% all the time and you're not controlling your schedule, and generally for signed singers, artists, bands, they don't write their schedules. The record label does. And of course, the record label sees them as a cash cow. So they're going to milk them as much as they can. So they'll have a show on a Monday, on a Tuesday, on a Wednesday, on a Thursday. They might have a Friday off, then a Saturday, then a Sunday, then maybe a Monday off, then a Tuesday and a Wednesday. So you're getting 3, 4, 5, sometimes even more than that, shows back to back. If you are belting in chest voice, leaning into it 100% on every one of those shows, you are going to burn out your voice and potentially get nodules on your vocal cords because of the amount that you are really leaning into them every night. And this is something that even singers who might not be singing, you know, hard rock or heavy metal, Adele, for example, had a problem with her voice because she would be leaning into her chest voice and get all of that emotion in that sound, but then not have the rest periods after to recover. And, you know, it's such an important thing to let your voice recover. But unfortunately, artists that are in really high demand, the record label will just book them for show after show after show after show without really thinking about these really delicate things called vocal cords that are the be-all and end-all of that particular artist. So from my point of view, with my own voice and how I know that it works, if I wanted to have a raspier sound, I would make sure that I was really warmed up, because the more I sing, the more warmed up my voice is, the easier that rasp then comes along. But if I just went straight out trying to get that sound, I would probably hurt my voice. I'd probably damage it. So I'm really careful with the raspy sound, because I know my voice doesn't lean that way naturally. I don't naturally have a raspy voice, but I know that it is something that is a byproduct of me leaning into my chest voice a little bit. So I just kind of balance that. And I don't go for an overly raspy sound, because I think, well, it's not part of my natural voice. So if I just sing the way that my voice is, then it will make my voice sound unique. And everybody, as an artist, wants to be unique. So for the final example, you'll have singers who want an even heavier sound and getting into heavier genres of music. You know, you've got vocal techniques that sound really heavy, and more often than not, if the singer is performing regularly live, they have figured out a way to get their voice to sound like it's being abused, but actually it's not. And more often than not, it's based in a vocal fry sound to make, you know, it sound like a guttural scream, but actually it's quite a small sound and it's quite a quiet sound. But when then, you know, sung into a microphone or created into a microphone, the volume is obviously increased. The mic does the work for that, but you're left with the sound of that vocal fry that's just being manipulated to sound a particular way. So let me just highlight something that I said about a singer that would be getting this sound performing live regularly, because if they're doing that, it means that they are doing it in a relatively safe way, that they've figured out a way to get their vocal fry or their mixed voice to sound really heavy, but actually it's not. Compare that to people that are now trying to manipulate the sound they want from basically forcing their throat to do it. So, for example, if I went, "Oh yeah," like that, instantly I can feel that that is really bad for my voice. But the distorted sound might be desirable to some people, and they might think, oh, that's the kind of rasp I want on my voice. And the recorded sound sounds like what they want, but they have to totally ruin their voice to get that sound. It's not worth it. There's no point, because if all of your dreams come true and you are then touring the world, you will have to do dates, unless you are very lucky that you're an independent artist and you literally control everything about your career, including booking venues and setting ticket prices. If you're relying on a record label, they have got to make money. So they have to make you, or they have to have you performing regularly to make enough money, just to break even with the money that they put into the tour. So if you're performing regularly live and you're doing that to your voice, to your throat, you're going to burn out your voice, and potentially you're not going to be able to sing when if you're young, when you make it. Even over the age of 30, you won't be able to sing anymore because you've burnt out your voice. So there's that way of doing it, which is not the right way of doing it. You want to make sure that it doesn't feel bad. If you're wanting to sing like other singers, then it's going to be a case of experimenting and, of course, doing it in a safe way, but kind of leaning into the sound a little bit more and see where that takes you. But you'll find that some singers have the ability to kind of add a natural sounding rasp at will, and again, that's just vocal technique. And some people just have an affinity for singing with great technique, usually because they've been singing for a very long time, and more often than not since they were kids, so they haven't learned to sing you know, later on in life, like for me, example, when I was kind of 30, I then started to try to now learn to sing. But I think that a lot of great singers build great habits with airflow, range, head voice, chest voice, all these things that they don't think about when they're a kid singing that are then with them later on in life, and they're just using their voice the most efficient way, including sometimes being able to add rasp. It's just something they've been able to do naturally. So that is it. If you are approaching this and you don't have that natural ability, yeah, you've got to be careful with it and make sure that you are producing it in a natural way for your own voice. Just to finish with, I want to mention about singers who might be fabricating this sound and therefore damaging their vocal cords, where they might eventually get nodules, which is a swelling on the vocal cords, and it stops the vocal cords from coming together properly. So that is going to be an absolute disaster, because say for example your vocal cords come together at a certain point where they touch and it's a C5, it's at the top end of your chest voice for a guy, or even an A4 or a G4, that might be at the top end of your chest register for guys. And at the point at which your vocal cords meet, there's now a nodule on the vocal cords, on one of the vocal cords. So it means that they can't push together for that particular note. So it means that because a nodule is like a solid growth on that vocal cord, it means that no matter how those vocal cords come together, there's now a gap that shouldn't be there, because that little ball of a nodule is sticking out and stopping the vocal cord from touching the other vocal cord where it should. So it means that your vocal cords could potentially, on that G4 or A4, now split apart where they didn't used to, because they can't make that seal effectively, because there's now something in the way of that seal. So that's where it's a disaster, because it means that you will have notes now in your range that you physically can't sing anymore. It's a physical impossibility because of a nodule stopping it from happening on your vocal cords. So this is why it's really important just to approach this kind of thing with so much care and attention, and not push things too hard, because even great singers who haven't been singing with a raspy sound, when they've sung just at the top of their range night after night after night, even they have developed a nodule on their vocal cords and have even had to have vocal surgery to have it removed, in which case, you know, that can go wrong. And if you have surgery on your vocal cords and that isn't successful, where does that leave your singing voice? So, yeah, an example of that, Julie Andrews, that unfortunately for her, she had a vocal nodule, and it was vocal damage that actually, I think she now realizes, with vocal rest and just being careful and spending more time away from singing, it might have actually rectified itself, because you can, with just taking it easy and respecting your vocal cords, you can reverse that process. And a lot of singers literally go on vocal rest where they don't talk. So, as a conclusion to this video, referencing Kim Carnes as I did at the beginning, I think that her voice just has that natural distortion, rasp to it if she wants it, but then she can also clean it up quite a lot as well if she wants to, going more back into her talking voice, and it's just something she has the ability to do safely. And if you are going to start experimenting with rasp and distortion and heavier genres, heavier styles of singing, just make sure you're approaching it from a safe angle and don't just dive into trying to do it all with your throat, because you don't want to be at the stage where you literally can't sing anymore because you were doing it the wrong way. But I think just feeling yourself, your voice, feeling how it feels, whether it hurts or not, is always a good way to suss it out and make sure that you're not doing anything that's going to be damaging your voice. So anyway, thank you guys for watching this video, and for the people asking questions about RASP, I hope that this has explained it. And if you did enjoy this explanation video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. As always, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, whether you like a raspy voice or not. and keep suggestions and requests coming in the comment section below as well for future analysis videos. Have a great rest of the morning, afternoon, evening, whatever it is where you are, and I'll catch you guys at the next one. Rock!